Mother's Day is supposed to be a day filled with love, hugs, and thank yous. But that morning, all I got was a question that stung more than anything else my son had ever said. My son Daniel was sitting across from me in his perfectly pressed designer suit, his gold watch catching the morning light. We were at his fancy house, marble floors, chandeliers, and not a single thing out of place. I'd brought him a small homemade pie, just like when he was little. He didn't even look at it. Instead, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "Mom, do you really like the $5,000 Clara gives you every month?" For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. I just stared at him, wondering if he even realized how much those words hurt. Money, that's what he thought of me, like love could be measured in checks and dollar signs. I smiled softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, I never asked for that money. I'm just happy to see you doing well." He chuckled. Not kindly. "Come on, Mom. Don't pretend you don't need it. Clara says you'd be lost without it." Clara, his wife, a woman who treated me like I was invisible unless someone was watching. I looked down at my hands, remembering the years I worked 2 jobs to keep food on our table, the nights I went to bed hungry so Daniel wouldn't have to. And now, my own child spoke to me like I was a burden being managed by his wife's generosity. But instead of anger, I felt something deeper. Disappointment. Somewhere along the way, I had lost my son to the glitter of money and pride. I looked up and whispered, "Daniel, do you remember what you gave me for Mother's Day when you were 10? He frowned. "No." I smiled faintly. "You made me a card out of paper and crayons. It said, 'You're my favorite person in the whole world.'" He didn't say anything. He just glanced at his phone, clearly done with the conversation. That's when I realized something was wrong. Not with me, but with him. He had everything, yet somehow, he'd lost the one thing money couldn't buy, a heart that felt. And deep down, I knew something about that $5,000 wasn't as simple as he made it sound. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel's words kept echoing in my mind. "Do you really like the $5,000 Clara gives you?" The tone he used, the way he said Clara gives you instead of we give you, it told me everything. For years, I'd been grateful for that money. Not because I needed it, but because I thought it was Daniel's way of caring for me. I used most of it to help others, donating to the church, sending groceries to a neighbor in need, sometimes buying gifts for the children at the shelter. But now I realized something didn't feel right. The next morning, I decided to call Clara. I figured it was time we talked woman to woman. When she answered, her voice was cool and distant, the way it always was. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Turner," she said. "Daniel's at work. Is something wrong?" "No," I said softly. "I just wanted to thank you for the money you've been sending every month." There was a pause, just a second, but long enough to feel heavy. Then she said, "Oh, that? Yes. I thought it would help you get by. It's nothing, really." I smiled even though she couldn't see me. "Clara, I appreciate it. But can I ask, where does it come from? Daniel never mentioned it before." Her voice sharpened. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said gently, "does Daniel send it or is it from you?" For a moment, I heard nothing but the faint sound of her breathing. Then she laughed. But it was the kind of laugh people use when they're hiding something. "Oh, Mrs. Turner," she said, "it doesn't matter. You should just enjoy it while it lasts." Then she hung up. I sat there holding my phone, my heart sinking, "while it lasts." Something about that phrase wouldn't leave my mind. That afternoon, I decided to check my bank records, something I hadn't done in months. I noticed the money wasn't coming from Daniel's account at all. It came from a company name I didn't recognize, a business in Clara's name. The next day, I went to the bank to ask about it. When the clerk printed out the details, her eyes widened slightly before she looked at me. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "are you sure you're supposed to be getting this money? It looks like it's part of a charity fund." "A charity fund?" My stomach twisted. If this was charity money, then where was the rest of it going? I left the bank with my hands shaking. The clerk's words echoed in my head. "It looks like it's part of a charity fund." I didn't understand. A charity fund under Clara's name that was sending me $5,000 every month? Why me? On my way home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something told me this wasn't just about money. It was about lies. That evening, I decided to visit Daniel and Clara's house. I knew I wouldn't sleep until I got some answers. When I arrived, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you nervous. Daniel was still at work, but Clara's car was in the driveway. I rang the doorbell. She opened the door, looking surprised. "Oh, Mrs. Turner, what are you doing here?" Her smile was polite, but her eyes were nervous. "I just needed to talk," I said softly. "Can I come in?" She hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. The house smelled like expensive candles and something fake, like everything in it was there to impress, not to comfort. We sat in the living room. I took a deep breath. "Clara, I went to the bank today." Her body stiffened. "The bank?" "Yes," I said. "I wanted to know where the money was coming from." "The clerk told me it's linked to a charity in your name." She didn't answer. Her eyes darted toward the window, then back at me. "Clara," I continued quietly, "why are you paying me with charity funds?" Her lips trembled slightly. For a moment she looked scared, like a child caught doing something wrong. Then she whispered, "You weren't supposed to find out." I sat still, my heart pounding. "Find out what?" I asked. She ran her hands through her hair, her voice shaking. "Daniel doesn't know, Mrs. Turner. He thinks the money comes from him. I used one of his business accounts to set up the charity. I had debts, serious ones. I thought I could pay them off before anyone noticed." I stared at her in disbelief. "So you were using my name to cover your tracks?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I never meant for it to hurt anyone. I just needed time." My heart ached, not only for the lie, but for my son, who had no idea what his wife was doing behind his back. I stood up, clutching my purse. "Clara, Daniel deserves to know the truth, and if you won't tell him, I will." Her face went pale. "Please," she whispered, "if you tell him, it'll destroy everything." I looked at her sadly. "No, Clara. The lie already has." That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a heavy heart. The truth was sitting right in front of me. My daughter-in-law had lied, stolen, and dragged my name into it. And my son Daniel, the boy I raised with love and sacrifice, had no idea. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. I couldn't eat or think straight. My heart kept asking one question: do I protect my son from pain, or do I tell him the truth? By noon I made up my mind. I couldn't let him live in a lie. Love wasn't about keeping secrets. It was about protecting what was right, even when it hurt. I called Daniel and asked him to meet me at my house. When he arrived, he looked relaxed, smiling like everything was fine. "Hey, Mom," he said, setting his phone down. "You okay?" I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that used to look up at me when he was little, full of innocence and dreams. "Daniel," I began slowly, "I need to tell you something about the money Clara's been sending me." He frowned. "What about it?" I took a deep breath. "It's not from you, son. It's from a fake charity account in Clara's name. She used your company's funds. She said she was trying to pay off debts, but—" Before I could finish, he raised his hand. "Mom, stop. That's impossible." "I wish it were," I said gently. "I saw the records myself." He stared at me for a moment, his expression blank. Then his face turned pale. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. Within hours, everything unraveled. Clara admitted the truth. She cried, begged for forgiveness, but Daniel's trust was already broken. He looked at me that night with tears in his eyes and said, "Mom, how did we end up here?" I reached for his hand. "Because sometimes, son, people lose themselves chasing comfort and forget what love really means." He nodded slowly, eyes red. "What do I do now?" I smiled softly, even though my heart hurt. "You rebuild." But this time, with honesty. A few weeks later, Daniel moved into a smaller home. He started fresh, new business, new life, new purpose. Clara left town quietly, and I never saw her again. On the next Mother's Day, Daniel came to my little house with a bouquet of wildflowers. No money, no gifts, just a card that said, "I finally understand, Mom. Love isn't something you buy, it's something you give." And for the first time in years, my heart felt full again. Because sometimes, the hardest truth leads to the most beautiful peace.